So this is going to be recorded. Thank you again for coming to the inaugural meeting of what will be several educational town halls. But so we're going to start with our agenda today, which is reviewing the agenda. It's happening now. And we'll jump right into the expectations. So the expectations is today's agenda is specifically on the topic that was predetermined to be an overview of the process of citizen involvement in land use planning in Tillamook County. And we were very fortunate to have the subject matter expert with us here, Sarah Absher, and as you can see on the agenda, the predominant amount of time today will be spent on her presentation, which will be about this very specific topic, which is big in and of itself. And so she will tell you all the parts. I'm not going to get into her topic. But I can say that this land use planning process, and Sarah will probably describe it in further detail, and the citizen involvement part is going to occur over a multi-year period. Would we say that's accurate, Sarah? Yeah, so she'll describe it more later. So what we're about to introduce is going to go on for a while. And today is not even the start of it. It started, I don't know, before I got on board, maybe 6-8 months ago. Chris, when did you first form that meeting with Rand?
It was back in February.
Okay, so they officially started in February. I think I joined not shortly after that, shortly after that. So, okay, so just giving you an overview that this is just started and it's going to go on for years. So strap in for a long journey. So that's why I have in their future sessions. So just over the next 18 months, the committee, which is the Citizens Survey Committee, which is comprised of Chris and Rand, we're putting these webinars together, working with Sarah, to educate the community on the process. And we anticipate that we're going to have about one of these town hall educational webinar sessions with very specific subject matter experts related to the topic for that day. We're going to have about one a month for the next 18 months. And each one is going to be recorded and then post to a community channel, so the citizens can review those, all in preparation for your involvement in the planning process, because these topics are, there's breadth and depth to them. And I can say, as a pretty well-educated human, I know very little about most of these topics. And if I'm going to give any thought into my involvement on the plan, I need to be more educated, and so a lot of other people agreed, and that's why we're doing this. Okay, so that's expectations. Okay, now how to participate in Q&A. And Sarah, I'm going to ask you this question because we didn't get it answered. Do you want them to hold their Q&A to the very end, or are you okay with Chris fielding some questions from the chat as it goes on? What would you prefer?
Either's fine with me. I'm happy to answer questions as we move along, especially if a deeper context will help everyone better understand what I'm talking about. So,
okay,
yeah,
great. So let's try this. So if you want, there's going to be two opportunities to ask questions. One is while Sarah is giving her presentation, if you would like to ask a question about something she's talking about now, of course, do not unmute your mic, because we're not going to accept verbal questions. Okay. What we are going to ask you to do is write your question to everyone in the chat room, and Chris Silkowski is going to look at those questions, and he's going to choose the ones that he thinks is most appropriate to ask Sarah at that moment. And we're just going to all trust and appreciate Chris for this task. Now, it is quite possible that your burning desire question will not get answered tonight. But we will have a list of all the questions, And if there were questions for Sarah, I will get the questions to Sarah. Okay. So your questions will be seen at some point. They might not all be addressed tonight, but we're going to do the best we can. But we want to open it up to, you know, what you guys are wanting to know about, because this is really unique stuff in the best possible way for a community, I think. So I feel very fortunate to be here. Okay. So then that's one way to participate while Sarah's talking. Another thing is once she does her half hour to 40 minutes, if there's not too many questions, you know, that could go on, you know. There is going to be a Q&A session, which will just be pure Q&A, but it's going to totally work the same way. You still put your questions up to the chat, and Chris and Rand get to pick them and ask Sarah. Okay, so there's that. Now we meaning the Citizens Committee, have 4 survey questions that we want to ask you. And what I'd like to do is, I think, Sarah, what I'd like to do is pepper these 4 questions, because they're polling questions. They're questions like, how long have you lived in Neskowin, and things like that. But there's only 4 questions. You know, like, how many meetings have you gone to? You know, that kind of thing. So we'd like to pepper them through your presentation. So if you could take 4 breaks and you could say, time for a poll question, I'll snap it up there. It'll take like less than a minute, and then we can move on. Does that sound cool with you, Sarah? Okay, now, if for some reason you're just rocking it, you're going all the way through your 30, 40 minutes and you don't get to the survey questions, no worries, because we'll do it right after your presentation and before the general Q&A. They're very quick. They'll take like less than 3 minutes for all 4 questions. Okay, so that's that part of it. All right, Chris or Rand, did I leave anything out?
Oh, it looks good.
Okay, Sarah, so now I'm going to turn it over to you. You can unmute yourself, and I'm going to stop sharing. And once I stop sharing, I think you should be able to share.
Oh, there's everybody. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you. Good evening. Oh my goodness. I haven't seen some of you in so long. It is just wonderful to see everyone. And those of you that I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Sarah Absher. I'm the director of the Tillamook County Department of Community Development. I want to see everyone. So my camera is here, but you are all here. So it's more important for me to look at you than to look into the camera, if you're okay with that, so I can see you guys. So I just want to say first, thank you so much for extending this opportunity to me to visit with all of you about the Oregon Land Use Program, and more specifically, how it relates to your community. I'm really excited about this opportunity because I would like to continue to do this type of outreach effort in other communities. So along with the survey questions, if you have any comments or feedback for me, I would really appreciate it. The plant behind me, the orchid, just so y'all know, I have the black thumb of death. It is not real, but I put it behind me because I think it's something nice and pleasant to look at. One of the things for me, I'll tell you tonight, will probably be the most dry session of our conversations. And I just want to preface the presentation tonight by saying that because I really want to see everybody come back for the next one. And so I promise there will be lively discussion, but there is a very dry technical element of planning. But I think it's important to go through this, especially this evening, because it's the foundation and the basis of the important project that we're all working on together. And there may be things that I visit about tonight with you that really don't make a lot of sense, or you're having a hard time connecting to the information that's being received. But those aha moments will pop up throughout the course of these sessions. So please hang with me. And I would say to Brenda and Chris, if you feel like everybody's eyes are glazing over, that is an excellent time for a poll. and I will not take any offense to being interrupted. A little bit more. I've been working for the county for 20 years. I started in community development in 2000. I am a person that went to school for business and came in actually into an accounting position, and was really fascinated by land use planning, and did a complete career change to become a planner. And it took several years, and I still learn every day too. Planning is a form of practice. I think we can become good at what we do, but there's always something new to learn, and there's always new challenges. One of the things that has been really important to me is to be able to explain components of our land use program and process in a way that is understood by members of the public. Walking into this profession, I too had to learn how to translate and decipher a lot of the technical components of land use planning. So one of my goals today is to be able to make sure that I'm relaying information to everyone in a way that is digestible and understandable. So if there's something that you don't understand that I'm talking about, please do not hesitate to raise your hand to Chris and let me know. Or if there's something later on you'd like more information about, please don't hesitate to ask. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure I share the right one. So what you should all be seeing is a beautiful blue background that says planning processes and citizen involvement for Tillamook County. Is that what everybody sees? Okay, and you don't see anything else, right? Okay, I can see Gail. Gail, do you see anything else, or is that all? Okay. Oh, no, you're still on mute. Okay.
We see you, and we see the blue thing. So I think we've got it.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. So planning timeline. I thought first it would be good to give a little bit of context and history about how we got here. A couple of fun facts. Oregon's land use planning process actually started in the late 1800s when the state of Oregon declared 30 miles of the public beach in Clatsop County as public highway. This was the groundwork for what we all know and love as the Beach Bell, and also was the groundwork for a larger discussion and idea and vision for Oregon that would preserve and protect Oregon's natural resources, but also balance into that strong economic development opportunities. So statewide planning goals were adopted by LCDC, which is the Department of Land Conservation and Development, in 1974 and 1976. Tillamook County's first comprehensive plan, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a bit, was initially adopted in 1981. What makes our comprehensive plan unique in the state of Oregon is that the voters actually voted on and passed our comprehensive plan. Tillamook County ordinances date back as early as 1966 and 1969, but the ordinances that we still actually work off of today were adopted in concert with the Tillamook County Comprehensive Plan in 1981. The Neskowin Community Plan and implemented ordinances came around in 1999. So in 1971, the Oregon Legislature adopted Senate Bill 10, which required that every city and county in the state must adopt a comprehensive plan that meets state standards. In 1973, Governor Tom McCall successfully petitioned the legislature to establish a statewide planning program, and that is what we know and love as Senate Bill 100. With that, Senate Bill 100 created LCDC and DLCD. LCDC's first task was to adopt a series of statewide planning goals, and those are the 19 goals that we're going to talk a little bit more about today. Now, to give this a little bit more context, Senate Bill 10 required cities and counties to adopt a land use program through their comprehensive plan by the end of 1971. And an interesting fact about that was that if cities and counties did not comply, that the governor had the ability to actually make those decisions and develop a plan for them. In 1973, when Senate Bill 100 was established, it also created with DLCD and LCDC. So DLCD is the Department of Land Conservation and Development. They're the state agency that's required and charged with the responsibility of making sure that the land use plan for the state of Oregon remains intact and implemented throughout the state in local jurisdictions. LCDC looks over DLCD and is essentially our state rulemaking body for the land use system. With the passage of Senate Bill 100 in 1973, Oregon became the first state in the nation to adopt such a comprehensive and forward-thinking planning system. Couple of other statutes that fall in line with comprehensive plan planning, and this all goes back to our goal 1 and 2, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, but I just want to get some of the technical stuff out of the way. ORS Chapter 197, part of Senate Bill 100, ORS Chapter 215, which is where we see a lot of our local zoning regulation implementation and procedures outlined. It also includes all of the restrictions for agricultural lands. And then ORS Chapter 92 is your subdivision, your subdivision law. So preparation of a comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plan is part of the goal 1 and goal 2 element. So what is a comprehensive plan and what makes this plan so important? The comprehensive plan is the backbone of our planning efforts and how we see planning conducted in Tillamook County. It is our plan for future growth and development. And one of the first components of that plan is citizen involvement. It is very important to the state of Oregon to ensure that residents and community members have a voice and have an opportunity to voice their opinions throughout many of our land use planning processes. This is a living document. It provides Tillamook County with an opportunity to make detailed statements describing the needs and desires of its citizens for the future of Tillamook County's land and water resources. It's a series of policies that help us through regulatory and implementing ordinances decide what can and cannot happen on various areas throughout the county. The plan is supposed to be balanced between statewide interests and local needs. So what that means is with the 19 statewide planning goals, our comprehensive plan has to make sure that it is in compliance and consistent with those overarching 19 statewide planning goals. The community of Neskowin and the community plan falls into the goal 14 element of our comprehensive plan. The plan is also to be used as a guide for problem solving. And it also talks about relationships between local, state, and federal agencies. So as you can see with the last bullet, it is supposed to be used for problem solving, implementation measures, appropriate for dealing with identified problems and needs. And in this case, the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan and the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone with implementing ordinances was part of the outcome of the framework of what our comprehensive plan is supposed to be used for. So in Tillamook County, goal 1, the planning process, to preserve, balance, promote, and protect what matters to Tillamook County. And so as you can see here, this is what was identified with the development of the comprehensive plan for what we needed to balance, preserve, promote, and protect. And it includes our natural resources and amenities. Our 5 estuaries. Tillamook County is very unique in that we have 5 estuaries through our small stretch of coastal shoreline. Our natural resource industries, our recreation, our tourism, and our rural character. So Tillamook County's plan, preservation of the fundamentals of Tillamook County. There are 5 sections of the plan that deal with one or more of the statewide planning goals. There is one goal that does not apply to Tillamook County, and that is another feature that's unique to Tillamook County. Out of the 19 statewide planning goals, there is only one goal that does not apply to the work that we do, and that goal is Goal 15, which addresses development and activity within the Willamette Valley. So I'll go ahead and move on. So talked about it acts as a guide and provides policies. One thing that's important to note, as seen on the bottom, zoning ordinance regulate uses that have been established through the policies in the comprehensive plan. So there has to be consistency between the comp plan and our implementing ordinances, which is the regulatory mechanism to make sure that what we decide in our comprehensive plan, that our goals and priorities for Tillamook County, that those goals and priorities are upheld, and that development as it occurs is consistent with those goals and policies throughout the plan. And in this instance with Neskowin and the community plan, there are goals and priorities throughout the plan. And the regulatory ordinances that are part of that community plan are what makes sure that the goals and policies of your plan are upheld. So developing a land use plan for Tillamook County. There were 5 sections that had to be met for the development of a land use plan in Tillamook County. Goal 1, citizen involvement. At the time when the community plan was developed, there were 5 citizen advisory committees that met for over 4 years to provide guidance to a technical planning team to develop the Tillamook County Comprehensive Plan. The South Citizen Advisory Committee extended from Cape Lookout to the Lincoln County line. Current Planning Commissioner Don LaFrance was actually involved in this process in the late 70s. And is still with us today as an active Planning Commission member. The second element was Goal 2, planning and state of economy. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to look at growth potential over the next 20 years. One thing that is probably important to note is that we have not been able to secure technical resources and funding to update the Goal 9 element of our comp plan. But that is something we hope to do because as you look at economy and as you look at how that goal in its relationship to your Neskowin community plan, you will want to make sure that there is some updated information about economy of the community of Neskowin as a whole. Description of Tillamook County's upland resources and management needs. So this was one of the 5 sections as well. And this includes policies for guiding programs dealing with the management of valuable upland natural resources and provides coordination with programs administered by federal, state, and other local agencies and with the private sector. These include agricultural lands. Goal 3 are forest lands. Goal 5 are open spaces, scenic and historic areas, and natural resources are areas that are inventoried that either can potentially prohibit development or have strict limitations to them. These include aesthetic resources, and these also include historic structures, which there are several in your area of South County. Goal 7, talking about natural hazards and disasters, which we will get into in a later session. And then also Goal 8, which is our recreational needs. The 4th section talks about a description of the county of Tillamook County's coastal resources. And these include goal elements 16, 17, 18, and 19. So estuarine, coastal, beaches and dune, and ocean resources. One thing that's important to note is that Tillamook County has not yet adopted a Goal 19 element into our comprehensive plan. This is something that we hope to do in the future, but again, it's largely dependent on technical and financial resources to help us develop that element. But the estuarine, the coastal, and the beaches and dune elements also apply to the community of Neskowin. You have estuary.
Yep. Sarah, can I interrupt you for a second? Some people are having trouble hearing the audio. Can you get closer to the mic?
I would love to. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Just be conscious of where the microphone is, because we are recording this and it was just garbling a little. So I think this is better.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
I think it's better.
I just don't want y'all to see my, yep. Okay.
I think it's good.
Okay.
Back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Brenda. So 16, 17, and 18 all do have relationships with development and with natural characteristics and features of the community of Neskowin. Most recently, one of the biggest undertakings and amendments that we did was, again, the adoption of the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan, the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone, and implementing regulations for development within those areas. Lastly, the last section for comprehensive plan development and compliance includes planning and implementing policies for housing, public facilities and services, energy conservation, and urbanization. So again, in the urbanization element, that's where your community plan lies. The other goals are also very important to the community of Neskowin. Housing, as you know, we are experiencing a severe housing crisis. Public facilities and services, that's where we are looking at adequacy of these services to serve your community. This includes fire response, it includes water, it includes sewer, and it's making sure that the intensity and level of development does not exceed capacity of what services are available for your community. Citizen involvement. Okay, so I think the boring part's over. So we could do a poll here, and then I'm also happy to answer any questions about the comprehensive plan in and of itself in general, which was my commitment to the first two goals, and explaining quickly how they are developed, but I'm happy to take questions too.
Okay, great. Well, while you're thinking of questions, let's try a poll. Let's see if I can do the poll while you're still sharing your screen. It might not work, but let me try it. And if there's questions, people can post them. So far, no questions.
Okay.
I'm going to try a poll. Let's try it. Here's the first poll question.
We might have to stop sharing. Do we have to?
Well, no, let's try it. I haven't tried it. And you'll have about 30 seconds to answer. Yeah, you'll see it's pretty self-explanatory. Go. Do you see the poll?
Yes, we do.
Okay, take the poll. I'll give you 30 seconds. It's only one question. And it's anonymous, by the way. Okay, we've got about 8 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to count you down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ending the poll. And now I can show you the results. I will share the results with you. And those are the results. You see them? Sarah, do you see the results?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, great. So that's the first poll. Thank you. I will stop sharing the results, and we have more polls, but we'll see. Pause. Have any questions come up yet, Chris?
No questions as of yet.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to continue?
I would love to. Thank you. So just to take a step back real quick. So the context of the community plan and the of the comprehensive plan and the development of the comprehensive plan is an important conversation to have, because that's really, one, it's where your community plan is housed. But two, with those 19 statewide planning goals that have now all been folded into our comprehensive plan throughout those 5 sections, the majority of those goal elements apply in Neskowin or have some sort of strong relationship. The goals that do not apply are the farm and forest zones, because you do not have any of that zoning within your community. But it is important, I think, because your CAC boundary extends outside of your community to areas like Slab Creek Road. Those goal elements, even though they are not directly part of the Neskowin Community Plan, they certainly do impact your friends and neighbors that are within the boundaries of your CAC. I don't have, we will talk about those goals briefly in an upcoming session, because I think it would be helpful to have that overall understanding of that area that surrounds your community, what that means and what can happen there, because ultimately there are activities that can happen within those resource areas that some of you may feel have an impact on your community. So if you have time to go through and you want to peruse the comprehensive plan, I will send Brenda a link. It's a lot of dry material, but it's important to understand where our program comes from and why our rules are structured the way that they are. And they're structured the way that they are because of the goals and policies of our comprehensive plan that must be consistent with the vision the state has for how land use planning and development occurs in the state of Oregon. So we have to be consistent on each step, up and down from the statewide planning goals to the implementing regulations that you see in your zoning codes. Citizen involvement. So goal 1 calls for the opportunity for citizens to be involved in all phases of the planning process. So what does that mean? It means in public involvement with two-way communication and accessibility to the planning process, making sure that technical information is easy to understand, feedback mechanisms for policymakers, so that you have an opportunity during a process and after a process to have the ability to reach out to your decision makers. And then also, when we can, make sure that there's adequate financial support for public involvement efforts. So in context of what we're currently all working on with the update of the Neskowin Community Plan and potentially revisions to the implementing ordinances, what that means is how can the county provide adequate resources and support? Our budget is not in the best of shape, and as many of you know, we have to be very careful about how we manage our budget. So for me, as the community development director and someone who wants to support these efforts, what I can do is make sure that my time is available to you. When it comes to mailings for the public notices, application fees that would generally accompany these types of legislative text amendment efforts, that we waive those fees because the county will pick up the cost to go through whatever costs are incurred for notifications, publications in papers, etc., to make sure that this process can happen.
Hey, Sarah.
Yes.
Good question came through.
Yes.
When will we see the current planning boundaries for Neskowin?
The planning boundaries for Neskowin. So are you saying that you would like to see a boundary map of the community of Neskowin?
Well, maybe it's the community growth boundary that currently exists.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was a distinction between the growth boundary and the boundary that extends beyond that, which is kind of driven by more geography.
Certainly. So that's an excellent question, Chris. And I think I can relay the question back in a way. So tell me if I get this right. The question is essentially, why is the community growth, and it's actually not a community growth boundary, it's a community boundary. And there's some different designations there. And this is something we went through, I think, quite extensively with the recent amendments to the code for the Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone. I did confirm through DLCD records that it is a community boundary and not a community growth boundary. They represent two different things. Again, it's a bunch of mostly technical stuff, but ultimately you have your unincorporated community boundary, and then you have your citizen advisory committee boundary, which are two very different things. The citizen advisory committee boundary, which is where your mapped region is for citizen involvement through your CAC, extends through Slab Creek Road, where Ran is. Ran is not located in the community of Neskowin, but he is certainly a part of, and Ran, I'm using you because I know you and I feel comfortable doing this, so thank you for humoring me. Ran is definitely a part of the Neskowin community. And just because Ran doesn't live within the unincorporated community boundary of Neskowin, it doesn't mean that he's not a member of your community or that things that happen in your community don't impact him, and vice versa. The unincorporated community boundary is a firm boundary that has been adopted as part of our land use planning program that is an urbanized area of rural unincorporated Tillamook County. There are special land use privileges within that unincorporated community boundary that do not extend outside of that boundary and up to Slab Creek Road where Ran is. For instance, all of your sewer can only be within the unincorporated community. Density, residential density opportunities for housing can only be within the properties within your unincorporated community boundary. There are commercial activity opportunities that are only allowed on properties within your unincorporated community boundary. That boundary will not shift without a public land use hearing process. The Citizen Advisory Committee boundary, which I do believe in spirit captures all of what should be the community and is the community of Neskowin, is a boundary that's ultimately decided by all of you. And so what that means for citizen involvement is it's making sure that everyone that you all feel is part of your community has a voice and an opportunity to participate in matters that happen or could potentially happen within the unincorporated, on properties within the unincorporated community boundary of Neskowin. Does that make sense? Oh,
yes, it does to me. Hopefully it does for Jean, who asked the question.
Yeah, and it's really important. I remember we had that discussion before, so I'm glad that's on tape and we can refer to people it often. So thank you. I'm going to ask you to keep going because we are running a little bit behind on time. It's now 6:40. So let's Sarah go on. We will have time for open Q&A at the end. So let's try to keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. So the benefits of citizen involvement. And this is part of the thing that I absolutely love about my job. And again, having opportunities like this and working with all of you and the other CACs, we have to make sure that there's confidence in the land use planning process. We have to make sure that decisions are well communicated, and we have to make sure that everyone has a better understanding of the process as each application comes before you for consideration and comment. So we must educate communities about planning and land use. We need to make sure that communities feel informed and confident, that in this case especially, that all of you have a sense of ownership in your community plan and this update process. And as equally important, that there's accountability for people like me and decision makers, so that it is clearly demonstrated that regulations are being enforced as they're intended to be. So that gets back to, again, you have your community plan and your policies, but ultimately it's those implementing ordinances and regulations of your Neskowin RR zone, your R1, your R3, your commercial zone. You have a recreation management zone, that all of these zones and those implementing ordinances that regulate development that they are being enforced and is administered as they are intended to be. So strategies for citizen involvement in community plan update efforts. I thought this was a great chart, and I wanted to put credit because I did not create this. This is in DLCD's Putting the People in Planning. But it's a spectrum of public participation. And in light of time, I'm not going to go into this too much, but it's the same goals, making sure that everyone is well informed, that they have an opportunity to be involved, that there's collaboration, and ultimately, and we don't get to see this with every land use application that comes into our office, but especially for plans and projects like this, that citizens and residents walk away feeling empowered by the project and the process. And that was another thing, again, I love the Neskowin Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan project because I felt like there was such a strong sense of empowerment by the majority of members of the community when that process was over. And that really should be our goal every time. So moving forward with Neskowin's community plan. This is a legislative.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
A question came through from Denny asking, after what happened in Tierra del Mar with Facebook, it's hard to feel like the community voice is heard. Can you speak briefly on how our plan can keep that from happening in Neskowin?
Certainly. So that's a great question as well. And that's one that I have received often over the course of the last few months. When decisions are made, and it's going to be no different when the community plan update proposal starts going through the legislative text amendment process, which is a public process, just like the Edge Cable decision was. A couple of more hearings are involved, and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners are the decision makers. The Planning Commission, which you are very fortunate to have 2 outstanding Planning Commission members in your community. They will participate with the other Planning Commission members to make a recommendation of a decision to the board, but the board is the decision maker. All of the decisions that we make, irrespective of the type of decision and the level of public involvement that is there, all decisions have a series of standards and criteria. And there's a delicate balance between responding to the needs and the opinions of the community and what the criteria require decision makers to consider when making a decision. There are, unfortunately, often times where we see applications where the community is not supportive of a proposal. But ultimately, the decision comes down to whether or not the proposal meets the criteria. The citizen involvement component is making sure that the public has an opportunity to participate. And that means that we notice the public and make sure that they know that we're reviewing an application. It means that we make sure that the public has an opportunity to respond before a decision is made, to voice any concerns they have about a project. And it means that the public also has an opportunity to appeal a decision if they don't agree with the decision that was made by local decision makers. That is citizen involvement in the public process. The most effective thing members of the public can do when responding to a notice that an application has been received and is under review is to make sure that the comments are directed to those criteria, because that is the bar in a review process and the standard that we are all held to, and that will not waver. And in the instance of Edge Cable, which it was tough. It was a tough application because, like all of you, I work with them and I care about them, and I know our decision makers do too. But at the end of the day, the decision had to be made on the criteria. And LUBA, in their final order and opinion, because the public did go through their right to appeals, and we held multiple hearings with multiple opportunities for public comment throughout that process. LUBA upheld the county's decision and affirmed that the county had made the right decision based on the criteria. So some of these requests are difficult, and the outcome isn't always going to be favorable to everyone. But what keeps the process fair is, one, the opportunity for the public to participate, and two, everybody knows that these decisions are not based on personal opinion, bias, or popularity. They are solely contained within a set of criteria.
Thanks, Sarah. One follow-up question on this topic. How much leeway will we have in determining outright and conditional uses in each Neskowin zone?
That's a great question too, Chris. So one thing that everyone's going to have to be mindful of as we audit and look at the allowable uses and standards are property rights. So anytime there's a deviation from what is currently allowed, if you're going to take things away, then you start looking at a property rights issue and a potential takings. The mechanism to keep the public informed is what's called a Measure 56 notice. And so what that means is, as the community decides what should potentially be considered to stay as allowable uses outright and conditionally, what should be removed, if there are some uses that you think should be added because your community has changed over the last 20 years, your needs may be different. So that's one thing that you're going to want to look at is, what are our needs today and what is our vision for the next 20 years, and how do we make sure that the character of our community is preserved? Well, the answer to that are your goals and priorities in your community plan and your implementing ordinances that are going to be part of Article 3 of the Land Use Ordinance. So it's okay to talk about what should stay, what should go, or what should be added. But what everyone has to be cognizant about is that as we go through that process and propose those changes to the decision makers, the liability that could be involved with the potential takings if uses and rights that currently exist are proposed to be removed.
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
So moving forward, Chris, those were great questions because they really wrapped up what I was going to talk about. As Brenda mentioned, this process will take a little bit of time. My goal and hope for all of us is that we have a finished project within the next 18 months, maybe 2 years. It depends on, how quickly the process evolves. Like I mentioned, with the comprehensive plan being a living, breathing document, your community plan is as well. So as we go through this process and start reshaping and redefining or fine-tuning or not changing components of your plan and your regulations, just know that things will continue to shape and reshape and evolve right up until the point of a final decision by the commissioners and adoption. So we will work on this continuously. There is no timeline. That is one of the great things about this type of project. With a legislative text amendment, we are not subject to a 150-day timeline like other planning processes are. So there's an opportunity to be slow and thoughtful and inclusive. And I am just happy to be along for the ride and that journey in however long the community feels like it takes to do it and get it done right before we move forward with hearings.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, so now we have 3 more survey questions, and then we're going to have a few minutes for open Q&A with Sarah. So let's see, Sarah, can you stop sharing your screen?
I would love to, Brenda.
Okay, and then we'll do a couple polls, and if you have questions, the polls come up separate than the chat. So you can go ahead and, if you do have questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. I'm also gonna ask you to participate in the polls. They'll just take a few minutes. So let's see, we'll do the next poll. Is this one launching? Just 30 seconds. Please participate. How many years have you owned or rented in Neskowin? How long have you been around?
So Brenda, can I add one more thing as people are doing that?
Yeah. I mean, there's still going to be open Q&A. Is it about the polls or is it about something else?
Yeah, no, it's just to kind of wrap up one other thing that I thought
Sure,
was
go ahead.
And I had this conversation with members from the community of Netarts the other day. Any type of regulation can look great on paper. As you consider certain types of amendments to regulations, additions, or exclusions, what we have to make sure of is that what's being proposed is good regulation that can be enforceable and that is clear. There's oftentimes when we look at regulatory proposals or even existing language, we may or may not be able to meet the community's expectation as to how something should be regulated. And so what you're also going to want to think about is those changes. Do we all have the resources and the capacity to make sure that that regulation, if adopted, is carried out and implemented the way the community can count on it to be?
Okay, thank you. And we still have time for Q&A at the end, but let me share the results. Thank you, Sarah. So are you all curious as to how many years you all been here?
Yes.
Here's the results.
Wow.
I don't think that's surprising, or maybe it is. Look at 16 people, 20 years plus. Awesome, you're lucky. All right, there's more polling. There's 2 more questions. Okay, stop sharing results, okay. Aren't these polls fun? Here's another one. This is fun. How many meetings have you been to before today? How many NCAC meetings have you attended before today? So yeah, we'll give it 25 out of 28, 3 of you, 20, 27. Okay, one person has not answered this question. It's probably me. Okay, I haven't figured out how to do the poll and answer it at the same time. And so we're going to end this poll and we'll share the results. So that's pretty interesting. All right. And one more question, and then we'll have open Q&A. And here's about communication. How did you hear about the meeting? You can check as many as apply. Okay, 19 out of 20. 10 of you haven't done it. 20. This is really good information for us to know, especially if you want to spread the word. 25 out of 26. Maybe 1 or 2 more of you can answer this question. How did you hear about the meeting? Unless that's could be. Okay, cool. Here we go. We're going to end that one. And the number 1 answer is email from NCA. That's 16 out of 29. Everything got something. All right. So now we have a few minutes for open Q&A. Chris, are there any questions for Sarah?
Don't have a question, but Gwen wanted to thank Sarah for her time and her commitment to the process.
Yes, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Sarah. Sarah can see all those. Yay!
Awake during the first half of that. And I hope those poll results for attending meetings continue to go up and they don't drop on the next survey, the next session, or else I will feel very bad about that.
Yeah, so are there any further questions?
Yes, Denny has a question. Isn't it true that even if this process goes through years of work and community input, it could be changed by a vote of 2 commissioners?
No.
So you mean as far as The plan itself could be amended or overridden by 2 members, or it only takes 2 votes to make a change.
I'm not sure. Denny, would you like to go off mute and maybe elaborate? Oh, he said the latter.
So yes, so majority rules. So it's always 2 out of the 3. One thing I can offer is part of my job as well is to make sure that the commissioners are well informed. And that's very important to me because I think that that's one of the ways I can help ensure the integrity of this process. So I talk to the commissioners regularly. I can only talk to them one at a time unless it's in a public meeting for public meeting law. And having 3 bosses is great. Having to repeat everything to all 3 bosses individually is also great. It takes a lot of time, but it is so worth it, especially in these processes. And I promise one of the things that I will do is to make sure that they are regularly updated and well informed of what is happening in this process so that by the time we get to the table for a decision that they are well informed to make a confident decision and you feel confident in the process and the decision that they made.
Okay, we have a follow-up question on that. Can the commissioners approve changes to the plan that the CAC does not support?
Yes, they can. But where those changes, doing this as long as I have never seen the commissioners change part of the land use planning program that was not necessary or that did not meet the criteria. One of the times where we've had to make changes to our land use planning program where they absolutely had to do it were things like FEMA regulations and the adoption of the new flood insurance rate maps. So FEMA came to us and said, you do this and you adopt these, or we're suspending all of the flood insurance policies in the county and you don't get any disaster funding relief. And you have 4 months to do it. Those are the situations where I've seen them take something and make a decision on something because ultimately, because of our required compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, we still had a public process, but ultimately it was something that had to be done. Again, I think they are a very thoughtful group of decision makers, and if it's an unfavorable decision by a community, that is usually because the criteria warrant a certain type of outcome.
Okay. Yeah, a few of us have a request. Would it be possible to get a copy of the slide deck outside of the recorded webinar so that way if we ever wanted to, find something in it, we could easily go without having to listen to the whole webinar?
Yes, and that's
Okay.
why it has quite a bit of text in it, is I was hoping then that way it would be a reference guide for everyone as well.
Great.
So Sarah, if I give it to Rand to post wherever, Rand, you post things for the NCAC, then that would be okay? Is that, because I have it. Okay, so I'll do that. And then I think you guys have a .org site, don't you, Chris?
No, we use NCA. We use NCA site.
Yeah, okay.
There's a link to NCAC through NCA.
So we'll get it posted up there, if that's okay. Okay, so that'll happen. Give us a few days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Plus a link to the video, the recording, that's still going on. This is all being recorded. Keep going. We have time for a couple more questions, so if you have a burning question, now's your time to get it to Chris.
Denny asked a follow-up question on the Facebook Tierra Del Mar matter. His understanding was that the zone change was opposed by every speaker at the town meeting with the commissioners.
Certainly. So it was not a zone change. It was a conditional use request with a similar use determination. The county has treated any type of fiber optic installation as a utility installation. What made this process unique was that it went through a privately owned piece of property and not public road right-of-way. We approve fiber optic cable lines all of the time in right-of-way, and it could be anything from the similar cables that came up through the beach in Pacific City to your typical Charter cable, Spectrum, telephone fiber optic cables that run through along the edges of road right-of-way. Again, that decision was made, it had to be made on the criteria to determine whether or not that development should have been approved. And yes, there was a tremendous amount of opposition from the community, and they were very vocal that they did not want it. And that did not fall on deaf ears. And where the community's concerns were addressed as best as they could be were through the conditions of approval that required Facebook to meet specific development standards and mitigation standards for construction of that and installation of that fiber optic cable through the property. But ultimately, again, it's not a majority opinion about whether or not somebody likes or does not like development. It gets back to the criteria and standards that determine ultimately if that development should be allowed. And the decision maker's job is to determine, based on the evidence in the record, whether or not the proposal meets the criteria. That's where the yes or no comes from.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
We have time for, we have time maybe for one more question? Chris, was there another question that you think would be appropriate for today's meeting? And then I'll remind everyone that we're having many more meetings about many more topics. And that the idea to make these meetings the most effective is for them to be focused on the topic at hand. I know that there's a lot of things that people want to say, and there's a lot of ways you can get your voice heard, not all at this town hall. You know, you have a variety of groups in town, the NCA, the NCAC. Please reach out to those folks to get your items discussed in those forums, because we really want to increase attendance. I mean, we had good attendance, I think up to 29 people here, but there's literally, I don't know, 600, maybe 1,000 people who are really the citizens. So to me, an N of 29, when I want to reach out to 1,000 is not that many. So in order for these to be productive, they have to be short, lasered, and focused. They are all being recorded. The polls were anonymous. I want to remind you of that. We are collecting that data, and the chat discussion will be recorded. And if you have any last-minute questions, or you can put them into the chat, and we'll get those to Sarah. So last chance for any burning questions. Chris, anyone else?
Just one additional question from Jean asking if we can post a PDF version of the community boundary map behind me to our website. So we'll get that done.
Yeah, excellent.
And I can help if you guys want some updated maps or a digital map layer of some kind. I'm happy to work with our GIS cartographer to get that to you. So,
okay. So we can get more maps. We can have them posted to the website. There will be a recording that will be also, the link will be posted. I want to make a plug for our future meetings. As I said, that we're going to have about one a month. I can't guarantee it yet, but what I'm trying to get together for October is one on, wait for it, emergency management response. So it was initially going to be later on in the year, but because of the wildfires, and we all had our own experiences that I'm sure we want to share, we're going to create a crucible for that, and I'm hoping it's going to be in October. What we have coming up after that, and I'm really excited about this, is information about watersheds and what the Watershed Council does and how you can be involved and informed with that. That now is scheduled for November. Okay, so those are the next two hopefuls. As soon as I get firm dates, I will let the community know. You'll know in the same way you heard about this, and maybe broader. We are looking generally at Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock. And we're going to try to make that consistent. So that just a plug. Please tell your friends. I'm so happy that you were here. I want to give my colleagues first a shout out to them, Chris and Rand, for helping me plan this. And of course, Sarah, you know, we're going to continue to thank you for, you know, the next 3 years. So, but Chris or Rand, do you want to say anything to the group before we close out?
Just one more question came through from Nancy asking any prospective zoning change for being able to build a home on a lot that was zoned for a home when the lot was purchased in the 50s or other times. Would that be a conditional use permit, Sarah?
So it depends on the zone, Chris. So it depends on what the underlying zone of the property is, and then any type of grandfathered uses that may still exist that would help with that development. All residential zones allow for at least one dwelling on the property, no matter if there was a house there in the 50s or not. There are supplemental regulations and standards that may further shape and define how that house gets there, or how big it can be. But ultimately, residential zones are intended to promote and ensure residential development. Moving forward with the community plan, one thing as far as the housing element goes and the housing crisis, Neskowin does have some great opportunities to look at residential development opportunities, and also look at things like accessory dwelling units or tiny homes or cottage clusters. If there's something like that that you guys are interested in considering that you think would be in line with the character of your community, those are certainly things that we can talk about to ensure that housing efforts and residential development can continue within your community.
Cool. All right, Rand, did you want to say anything to your colleagues and friends?
I wanted to thank everyone for showing up and for listening and for having good questions. And I hope to see you again in around a month in the same setting, and bring some other folks along.
Okay.
Get more involved. That's our goal.
Okay. So I'm going to say my final thank you to all those in attendance, each and every one of us. Stay tuned for what's going to happen in October. I'm going to conclude the meeting, which will basically shut everyone out. So I'll count to like 5 so you can wave to your friends and be prepared to leave. And we're all leaving now, okay? Bye, everyone. So good to see you. Thanks for coming. All right. 3, 2, 1.